them. And all of these multiple branches, many of them don't even have names. They're called communicating veins or venous communicantes, and they're variable from one person to the next. And you make new ones if you need them. And so a lot of them don't have vessels, but we do have some major superficial veins. I had a student a year and a half ago that had such prominent, beautiful, superficial veins. There's two patterns at the elbow. She had one on one upper extremity and the other on the other one. And I didn't have a smartphone at the time, and I kept trying to remember to bring in a phone and take a picture of her anterior forearm, because it was just classic for the two different presentations that I'm going to show you. All right, so recognize that even the superficial veins I'm drawing, there's a whole lot more than those. All right, these are just recognized ones. And so, again, I'm going to draw them in reverse. I'll draw the superficial veins, and the deep veins in the same color that we've been utilizing, and then I'll draw the superficial veins in a slightly different color so that pattern is visible. So draining, do you remember we'll get to that in a moment, but remember we had subclavian artery, axillary artery, brachial artery, ulnar, and radial. Okay, so we're just going to draw that in reverse. We have a venous and a dorsal venous arch, a palmar and a dorsal venous arch. Other than that, we're not going to worry about those components. So and this is going to be a very wide forearm, okay, to get everything in there without it being overcrowded. So from the little finger side, we're going to have an ulnar artery, and from the thumb side, we're going to have a radial artery. And then those will join to form I'm going to make that a little bit longer here. Those will join together to form a brachial artery.
Vein.
Sorry, vein. Actually, let me make this a little bit higher because I'm going to have a really long forearm here. And then the brachial vein is going to run into become the axillary vein and eventually become the subclavian vein. So it should remind you of the pattern sequence that we had with our arterial system. Okay, so that plan, those vessels are found with the veins, with the arteries, which they share the name. And now I'm going to overlay on that our superficial vessels. And I was going to do that in purple, but I don't see it. There we go. So our two major superficial veins are found medial and lateral. Both of them are going to drain into the axillary. The lateral vein is going to join into the axillary just before it becomes subclavian. And the basilic is going to join into the axillary just as it became axillary after it was brachial. So this is brachial, this is axillary, and here's subclavian. So I'm going to draw the cephalic one first. This is our most lateral. Again, I told you our forearm here is going to get a little wide. So that is cephalic. What number is cephalic? 15. Basilic is medial. into the axillary just after, it's kind of like the basilic and brachial join to form the axillary. Right? So here is axillary beginning, here is axillary ending. And basilic is 16? Now they are connected. Okay? So at the elbow region, they are connected, and this can be in a H form that you see here, or in a Y form. The only reason I started talking about H and Y is because of variations that you can have. So I'll just show that to you in just a second. In the H form that you see here, here is the cephalic. The cephalic starts on the back of your hand. So as that dorsal venous arch, some of you may see more visible than others. All right, if you have a trouble seeing your veins, you might want to just let them hang down a bit so they can pull up some volume. So here's the dorsal venous arch. Cephalic, remember, is lateral. So it's going to come up here, and it looks more kind of lateral here, and then it comes onto the back of the arm, comes up here and disappears into your deltoid region as it's going to hit the axillary just before it becomes the clavus. So it has to do that at the edge of the clavicle, right? And then basilic is sometimes more difficult, but that starts at the little finger side of your wrist and goes up the medial aspect, and it disappears early because it has to join with brachial to form axillary. So it's going to stop about this level, whereas cephalic you're going to see as high as this level. And then in the H pattern, at the area of the elbow, not quite going straight across, we have this connection. Let's see, I'm in the wrong direction. And that H pattern is known as the median cubital, number 17. Not medial, but median. It's right in the center. And then I'll draw the Y pattern over here to the side. So this would be basilic. This would be cephalic. Instead of a median cubital, this is identified as the median basilic. And this is identified as the median cephalic. So 21 and 22. And then 20 comes up the midline of the forearm and is known as the median antebrachial. Ante means for, brachial arm. right, so dorsal venous arch starts across the back of the hand, comes laterally, and comes up the forearm, and then disappears about here. I wasn't planning on doing this, so I would have worn a different shirt. Okay. Basilic is medial, and it comes up here like this, and disappears about this level. Right. Median antebrachial comes up the forearm and heads towards basilic. So now the difference is, do you have a band across that would be just one vessel, which is the median cubital, or do you have median cephalic and then median basilic? So that would be the major superficial vessels of the upper limb. We still have the deep radial and ulnar and brachial. Okay? So now if I ask you to trace a drop of blood from the little finger back to the heart, you have a choice, a couple of choices, 3 choices. You can go the deep side, you can go ulnar to brachial to axillary to subclavian. You can go superficial, little finger is medial, so you can go basilic to axillary to subclavian. That'd be a little bit shorter. Well, not that much. Or you could start basilic, and then you could cross over via the median cubital to the cephalic, and then go into the axillary. Okay. So again, remember I give you answers along the way to check yourself against. So if I put in there median cubital vein, and I've asked you to start at the little finger, then you're going to have to cross over somehow through the median cubital vein and go up the cephalic. So if I wanted you to do that, I would indicate by some of the answers I gave you along the way. Yes?
Where is that the Y diagram?
We have a green flat diagram there hanging against the wall in the back, and they show a Y diagram. This woman that I told you about had the H pattern on one hand, forearm, and the Y pattern on the other. So it's just a variation that occurs among individuals.
So is it connect? I'm like, that's why I'm
It's in
lost.
place up. So in other words, this would be the H pattern where you have just a single vessel going across, or instead of a median cubital, you can replace that with the Y pattern. You don't have a median cubital, you have a median cephalic and a median basilic.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
You have 2 different numbers on one vein.
I have 17,
You have 19 and 16 on the basilic.
okay, what should be, I have 18, 19,
Well, what's 19?
Well, 19 and 16
Oh.
are both basilic on the list, and 18
Except left and right.
and 15 are both cephalic on the list.
okay.
I
That's
think
why.
one set is showing that
One's,
the
I
H-
see, one's right and one's left on the list. That's why I have 2. Because when the diagram this list came from, I had the Y pattern on one arm and the H pattern on the other. So, when I looked at that, that's why I have 2 different numbers.
Should we put down 18 and 19? Or does it
Whatever.
matter?
18 and 19.
Whatever
goes
matches
more
my
to
diagram.
that side.
So
The
19,
18
16 basilic, 18
and
was,
18 and 19 goes more for the
cephalic.
pattern.
You could have the Y on both sides.
but that was why I had 2 numbers, because I had 2 different extremities.
Can you have an 18?
So let me put it over here.
Yes, you can.
What was the first cephalic basilic, was 16?
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's leave that one there, and then we'll put
How do we know what
16,
we have?
we'll put 19 over here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And for cephalic,
18 for the second one.
so then we will put, what was the earlier cephalic?
15.
15? So let's change this one
See
to
your veins?
15, and we'll change this one to 18.
So the basilic is medial and the cephalic is lateral?
Yes.
Is there a way to tell if we have an H or Y pattern?
By the way it looks. All right, now notice back on the diagram here, the cephalic is coming up high. Remember, axillary is going to be in the armpit. Okay? Cephalic runs between deltoid and pectoralis major. So that can be confusing for students sometimes. They're looking at positions and they're not thinking superficial or deep. So when you look at this torso back here, see this vessel right here between the pectoralis major and deltoid? That's the phallic. Here's the subclavian. After it passes, it's right, you can see the clavicle right here. So that's the subclavian right there. Right here is where the phallic passes down into subclavian. The axillary is going to be here under in the armpit in the axillary area. So this superficial area right here, this is cephalic vein, not axillary. Axillary is down here, cephalic is up here. Okay? All right, so now let's do the chest region. Oh, this is just showing lymphangitis. It was a possible case study. Maybe I took it out last semester. But veins can also get infected, especially in the hand region. So when my oldest was still in high school, I picked him up at the after basketball practice one day. He said, "Mom, look at my hand." He said, and there was a blue streak that went from his base of his thumb all the way up his arm and disappeared right about here, where the cephalic vein disappeared. And so I said, you've got septicemia, you've got some infection into your bloodstream in the venous system, so we need to get you on antibiotics so it doesn't spread throughout your body. So I took him to urgent care, since it was already nighttime, just up on Manzanita, and it took a while for them to see him. So while we were waiting, he had some kind of a blister or a boil on his other arm that he was playing with and ended up popping. They gave him antibiotics. By the time we got home and got him filled, this one had disappeared. We woke up in the morning, he woke up, and this time the streak was on the other side, going where the boil area was, and even though he'd been on antibiotics all night. So since it was daytime, morning, I took him to our family physician, and they put him on stronger antibiotics, but you could clearly see the region of the vessel that was inflamed because of that infection, and that's what you're seeing here. Not the blue line. The blue line is, I diagramming so they can see how far it can spread, but the red. So we're going to look at the chest now. This is moving into the chest area, so just showing from a cadaver the difference in thickness. So here is the shorter right brachiocephalic vein, the longer left brachiocephalic vein, and the superior vena cava. Now some of you had superior vena cavas on your frogs. With others, you could go over and look at them. And remember I said to notice the difference in the thickness of the wall between the vena cavas, which are very large vessels, and the aorta, because the pressure is on the complete opposite extremes. Vena cavas are blood going into the heart, so they're going to be at one of the areas of lowest pressure. So we have the vena cava emptying into the heart. The heart is missing, obviously, right here. And we are going to look at the veins that drain the chest wall. They're going to get back to the heart in a couple of different ways, just like they got to the heart in a couple of different ways. I mean, they left the heart in a couple of different ways. So we have internal jugular veins, just like we had internal jugular arteries. Only they're coming off, they're draining into the brachiocephalics instead of draining into the subclavian. Remember our internal thoracic artery that I showed you on the back of that breastplate was a branch of the subclavian. So here they're draining into the brachiocephalics. So this is going to be on the anterior chest wall, just lateral to the sternum. Wrong place. And it's intercostal veins that are draining into them. really number 8 or 9 is the internal thoracic. 8. And vein is anterior intercostals, I hope.
9 is.
Okay, 9, I'm sorry. Alright, so again, if we look at the breastplate, the anterior chest wall. The red would be the internal thoracic artery, branching from the subclavian artery, and the blue traveling with it would be the anterior intercostal vein. So when we were at the corners on Tuesday, the second group had a different faculty member with them from the PT program, and she was talking about how they decompress. Someone's having air or fluid getting into the, or particularly air getting into the pleural cavity. They go in, push down on the intercostal areas, and then they'll insert a tube. Usually from the lateral aspect, sometimes from the anterior, the third intercostal space. And so Jeff dissected out some of these intercostal vessels because they are found just inferior to the inferior border of the rib. So you don't want to go right under the edge of the rib, you want to go closer to the top of the next rib because that's where these vessels are located. So that's anterior intercostals. Posterior intercostals, we don't have a posterior vessel at the back of the chest. We have aorta, but we don't have a posterior venous vessel because our superior vena cava is stopping here at the top of the heart, the base of the heart. The inferior vena cava is only about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long after it passes through the diaphragm. So there is no posterior venous structure for much of the posterior intercostal, posterior thoracic wall. So we introduced another set of vessels, and I'm going to draw these in purple as well, since they are new. They're not really superficial, but they're new to our system. We didn't have them with the arteries. And they're going to pick up some of the lumbar vein flow, not all, but some of the lumbar vein flow, and our posterior intercostals. Okay. So we're going to see a pattern similar to this, not quite identical, but similar to this. It's a little easier to see this pattern than it is to view all the anterior intercostals and see it on this diagram. All right, because you're looking through from front to back. So that's why I'm going to draw it in a different color. So let me draw in the diagram, the diaphragm. And so coming up from the posterior abdominal wall, we have a vessel that enters into the posterior thoracic wall and drains into the superior vena cava. Most of you probably weren't aware of this vessel when you were looking at the heart model. But I'll bring out the more simplistic of our heart models. Remember the superior vena cava? These two vessels right up here are going to bring the brachiocephalic veins. As you look to the side right here, here's this vessel that drains the posterior chest wall and some of the posterior abdominal wall. All right, emptying into the side of the superior vena cava. It's going to pick up lumbar veins, some of them. Others, lumbar veins will continue to go into the inferior vena cava. And then it's going to pick up posterior intercostal veins. Remember what I've drawn in purple is on the posterior aspect of the chest wall. What's in blue is anterior. So So there's a gap between these. This vessel is known as the azygous vein. Now down in the abdomen, you'll also see it called the ascending lumbar. I'm fine with azygous for everything, right? So azygous is number 26. Let me get to that point. So we have posterior intercostals, which are 23. And then on the left side, we have a similar vessel, but it crosses over behind the heart. And empties into the azygos. That would be 24. It's the hemiazygous, so it's only partly azygous. And then up here at the top, we have a separate one that kind of starts on its own. And that is the accessory hemiazygous.
I thought it drained into the azygous, the hemiazygous.
That hemiazygous drains into the azygous.
But the accessory as well, like that's what
No,
that shows.
that picture is, I said partly this picture is what we're gonna look at, but you won't see that in most patterns. So if we go back to the previous, I mean, that can exist. What I drew was kind of up there at the top. So here we have the hemiazygous, and here's the accessory. And then we have the azygous. So the best model to see this on, and this is where we're going to stop for a lab break, the best model that you would see this on is on our circulatory tree. So be gentle with these because these wires are old, but here's the left subclavian artery coming around, and step one out of the light here, from the back, okay, coming around here. Here's the internal thoracic artery coming down, and coming off the internal thoracic artery are anterior intercostal arteries, all right? Then remember the posterior intercostal arteries came off of the aorta. So these are posterior intercostal arteries. And they join and become the same vessel. There's just a continuous loop from front to back. Now, posterior intercostal veins aren't shown on here, but these are the two azygous and hemiazygous vessels. So those are most easily seen from the posterior view because they're along the posterior thoracic cavity. And so here you can see how this one crosses over to this side. That crossing over is a hint as to where you are in case you get mixed up right to left from looking at the back rather than looking at the front. So crossing over is hemizygous, and this one is azygous coming into the superior vena cava. This one would be the accessory hemiazygous, draining into brachiocephalic. It can also drain into subclavian, which is what it's doing here. Okay, so that's the best three-dimensional aspect that we have of it. Some of the models you'll see pieces, like on the ground torso back there, you'll see a little piece of the hemiazygous, but it's this pattern. If you recognize the pattern, though that can be more variable in individuals than, of course, than there are models. So when a surgeon is doing surgery, especially with the veins, they have to be aware